Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy is a classic PlayStation 2 3D platformer that I've been really enjoying playing recently. While replaying the game, I was trying to think of challenges to attempt to make the playthrough more interesting. This game has 3 main collectibles. Power cells are the most important one of them. There are a total of 101 of them to be collected across every level, and they are required to progress through the game, as some areas have a set power cell count required to access them. Scout flies are a collectible obtained by breaking these special red boxes. Every level contains 7 of them, and by obtaining all of them in a level, you will be rewarded with a power cell. The Precursor Orbs are the last collectible that you can obtain. These are by far the most abundant one, with a total of 2,000 of them being scattered across every single level. So I decided that it would make for a very interesting challenge to try and beat the game with as little of these as possible. And to make it even more interesting, I decided to also try to get the maximum completion percentage possible, which would require me to collect as many power cells as I could. I will be doing this run on the PC decompilation of the game made by the Open Goal team, as it offers many quality of life features that make creating this video a much better experience. It plays the exact same as the other versions of the game, meaning any trick executed on this run will also work the same way regardless of what console you are playing on. I will be leaving a link in the description for those who want to check Open Goal out. With all of that in mind, it's finally time for me to show my attempt at this challenge. Once I boot up the game and stare at this nostalgic intro screen for a while, I started use save file and instantly skipped the first cutscene to get right into action. I quickly obtained my first power cell and reached these special boxes that contain the scout flies I mentioned before. I break them all to obtain my second power cell, and right after that, I reach my first problem. To open this door, I am required to have what's called Blue Eco. This is mainly used to activate certain mechanisms, but it also has some side effects on Jak. When you collect Blue Eco, certain collectibles like Precursor Orbs will automatically be attracted to Jak whenever he gets near them. This means I can't cross this bridge and step on that Blue Eco vent, as no matter how I try to make my way back, I will be forced to collect some orbs. Thankfully, by going down to this area, I can find these 2 floating Blue Ecos, and by carefully avoiding all of the orbs and by getting one last floating Blue Eco on the way back, I am able to get to the door just in time. With some simple platforming, I am able to get the last power cell of the level and open the portal to warp to the first hub world of the game. Sandover Village is one of the 3 main hub worlds in the game. One common detail they all share is that they contain multiple power cells that require you to pay a certain amount of Precursor Orbs to an NPC. As the challenge of this run is to beat the game with no orbs collected, I will have to miss out on a total of 15 power cells across the hub worlds, already dropping the maximum amount of power cells that I can currently obtain to 86. There are, however, still a couple of power cells obtainable on Sandover Village. First, I worked on collecting all of the scout flies, and on my way, I talked to this NPC that rewarded me with a power cell after carefully guiding all of his yakos back to the pen that they had escaped from. With some very careful movement, I grabbed the remaining scout flies I needed to obtain another power cell. While attempting to do so, I accidentally grabbed my first orb of the run. Thankfully, since I saved my game beforehand, I was able to load a save file from before I had collected the orb and quickly retry this section. Throughout this run, I will be saving the game at any chance I can to prevent having to reset my run whenever I make a mistake. I also talked to the sculptor, who asked me to find his pet friend that he lost on the Misty Island in return for a power cell. More on that later. Right after this, I made my way to the Sentinel Beach, and after collecting a few easy scout flies and a power cell on the way, I reached this power cell which was stolen by a pelican flying nearby. By following the bird to the platform that it escaped to and punching it, I made it spit out the power cell to another platform far away, which I then made my way to as fast as I could so that I could obtain the power cell before the bird got there. After that, with some careful movement, I crossed this bridge and destroyed these 5 rocks, which rewarded me with yet another power cell. The next power cell had a couple annoying orbs to avoid, so instead of following the intended path, I jumped onto these rocks, and with a high jump, I was able to make it up to this ledge. and after collecting a skullfly in the way, I punched this massive egg off the ledge and talked to the bird watcher to obtain the power cell. After accidentally falling into this hole, I quickly used my uppercut attack to punch up a log so that I could collect another skullfly, and after following these birds for a couple seconds, an avalanche started, which rewarded me with a power cell that I would collect later on my way back. But before that, I quickly collected another power cell on top of this temple nearby, as well as my last skullfly for yet another power cell. After making my way back and collecting the power cell from the avalanche, I realized that I was still forgetting one last power cell. While I couldn't take the normal path to the top of this lighthouse, by carefully jumping and landing on top of this rock, and with some more clever jumps, I managed to climb all the way to the top and kill these two enemies to finally obtain my last power cell of Sentinel Beach. Now that I was finished with this level, I made my way to the Forbidden Jungle, where I jumped on top of these green eco boxes to collect a skullfly. I then made my way up to these platforms and broke these wooden sticks, which unblocked the path that was blocking the blue eco beam. I started connecting all of the echo beams while collecting some skullflies on the way, especially this really nerve-wracking one, and then fell onto this area where I found a fisherman. He would reward me with a power cell after I caught 200 pounds worth of fish for him, as well as allow me to use his boat to reach another level later on. After quickly completing his minigame, I then finished connecting the echo beams and returned to the Sandover Village, where I talked to the mayor to be rewarded with another power cell. After making my way back to the Forbidden Jungle, I fell down this area where I obtained some blue eco, which allowed me to unlock this door to get another power cell. And then in that same area, I swam through this opening to obtain another power cell. I then made my way through the path to obtain a skullfly, and then went to this platform to obtain some blue eco to raise this bridge, which led me into the Precursor Temple. Here, I followed the path on the left, being careful to not obtain the skullfly yet, as doing so would cause the last skullfly to drop the power cell right on top of the Precursor Orbs. And then with a very careful jump, I fell into skullfly number 6 without touching any of the Precursor Orbs next to me. I made my way back and finally collected the skullfly I had previously avoided to obtain another power cell, and then I went to the top of the temple for one more power cell. By riding this platform down to get inside of the temple, I made my way through this area to reach the blue echo vent switch. This would enable every blue echo vent that was previously disabled across every single level. This would now allow me to enter these previously inaccessible doors, which led me to the first boss fight in the game, which I easily defeated and obtained the last remaining power cell of this level. Now, all I had to do was leave the temple and make my way to the next level. However, here I came across another issue. This blue eco pad is the only exit on the temple, and unfortunately, there are a bunch of Precursor Orbs in the path out of the temple that the jump pad forces me to take. But thankfully, by pausing at just the right time where I have exited the temple but have yet to collect any of the Precursor Orbs, followed by saving and loading my save file, I get respawned at the checkpoint right at the start of Forbidden Jungle, bypassing all of those Precursor Orbs. After finishing Forbidden Jungle, I made my way back to the Sandover Village, where I used the fisherman's boat to make my way to the Misty Island. Here, I started by collecting a couple of these floating bits of blue eco, and made my way to this blue eco platform that took me to a power cell. After collecting an easy skullfly, I made my way to this path on the right, and with a well-timed roll jump, I crossed over this gap, avoiding the orbs on the way to obtain another skullfly. Then I dropped down to this area where I collected some blue eco to open this door, and after being ambushed and defeating all of the enemies, I was able to obtain another power cell. A little bit after, by carefully jumping on top of this small rock and then performing a high jump, I was able to barely grab this ledge and jump onto the platform above to collect one more skullfly. I made my way to the big boat where I collected another skullfly as well as a power cell nearby. I then very carefully followed this wood bridge, making sure to not get hit by these rolling logs, and reached this area at the top where I killed the true enemies guarding the cannon, rewarding me with a power cell. After this, I made my way back to the start of this island, where I walked on this big skeleton structure and obtained another skullfly. After falling down, I spotted the sculptured muse, so I quickly chased it around, being careful not to touch any of the orbs, and after a minute of chasing it, I finally managed to grab it. I then made my way to this blue pad to ride the zoomer for the first time in this run. This vehicle works pretty simple. Besides being able to move left and right, you are also able to jump with it. I start this area by killing these 6 enemies that are flying around, which spawns in a power cell inside the bottom secret path on the boat. After carefully collecting the power cell, I go up this ramp and barely sneak in between these orbs to collect my last Skullfly for yet another power cell. By moving myself to the left side of this ramp, I can just barely get enough speed to where I'm able to jump to that floating power cell above me while avoiding the orbs on the way. After this, I make my way back to the Sandover Village to bring back the muse to the sculpture for my final power cell of Misty Island. Now that I'm finally done with all of the main levels of the first hub world, I make my way to the Fire Canyon, which is one of the 3 small zoomer sections that connect the hub worlds together. Each of these require me to have a certain amount of power cells, so that the zoomer can be upgraded to allow me to progress to the next level. These levels only have a few power cells, so there's not much to show here. I collected all of the 7 Skullflies while being careful to not overheat the zoomer and also avoiding the Precursor Orb boxes to obtain one of the power cells. Right after that, I reached the end of the Fire Canyon, which rewarded me with the other power cell of this level. I had now reached the second hub world of the game, Rock Village. I quickly made my way to the warp gate to open it for use, and then started working on collecting all of the Skullflies, making sure to talk to all of the NPCs I found on the way. After getting my power cell from collecting all of the Skullflies, I swinged my way to this area that took me to the Lost Precursor City. Once I made it all the way down, I made my way through the first rooms where I collected a few Skullflies on the way, and eventually I reached this big room. Not only did this room have 2 Skullfly boxes to break, but it also had these 3 colored pipes, where after pressing the button for each, the object behind the glass would get moved to a certain area where I would have to make my way to obtain that item. Collecting the power cell on the first Skullfly was easy. However, the last Skullfly is dropped right on top of these 3 Precursor Orbs. Thankfully, with a very carefully timed double jump, you can obtain the Skullfly without collecting any orbs. I then made my way to this next room that had an easy power cell right in the middle of it, and in the next room I made a right turn to make my way to this small puzzle section. Here, all I have to do is step on each of these platforms without touching a platform that I previously stepped on. After completing it, I obtained another power cell and then made my way back to the room I was previously in. I now took the left path, taking me to this room where I pressed down this button to temporarily raise these platforms to obtain yet another power cell. Now, it's time for the first big challenge of the run. You see, once I made my way down this slide, I got to a room where if I wanted to collect a power cell, I would need to use this blue eco vent to light up all of these blue eco structures. However, no matter how I tried, 2 of these blue eco structures were too close to some orbs, always forcing me to have to collect at least 2 of them. Thankfully, there is a workaround for this power cell. Going back to this room, instead of taking down the slide, I bait these enemies to this specific corner where I can then high jump to land right on top of them, which actually allows me to get another high jump. This just so happens to give me enough height to where I can jump over the hitbox of this wall and let out a bounce in some electric water. I can then carefully jump to this window, doing my best to not get slid out of it, and then I can do what speedrunners call zoom walk. By walking off the ledge of any platform, followed by repeatedly entering and exiting first person mode in a certain rhythm, Jak will maintain himself in his grounded state, allowing him to essentially walk in the air while losing a minimal amount of height. This allows me to slowly make my way to where the power cell was initially located, and after close to a minute of doing this, I'm finally able to obtain it. At this point, I am missing 3 power cells to finish the level. I quickly got one of them by breaking my last Skullfly box, and then all I had left to do was go down this slide, collect the power cell on this platform in the middle, and complete this poison rising section to reach the last power cell. However, to do so, I need to collect this blue eco to be able to progress, which would make it impossible at a certain point to keep going without being forced to collect some Precursor Orbs. Since there was poison rising very fast, I also wouldn't be able to wait until the blue eco runs out. Thankfully, there are 2 different workarounds for this issue. Since the poison only starts rising when I stand on that middle platform, I can instead, with a very carefully timed roll jump, followed by a spin to maintain my height for a bit longer, make it to the next platform, skipping the trigger that starts raising the poison altogether. This would allow me to wait for the blue eco to run out before I progress further. However, avoiding some of the orbs on the way up can still be quite tricky. So instead of doing this, I loaded back my save file to quickly make my way back to the previous room to execute another skip by standing on this platform and timing my jump so that I start jumping when the wind is pushing the platform high up. I can gain a lot of extra height and just go over the hitbox of this wall to go out of bounds. With some carefully timed spins, I can then go back in bounds close to the ending of the Poison Rising section, skipping all of the most difficult to avoid orbs. After that, I just carefully make my way to the end and grab my last power cell of this level. After leaving Lost Precursor City, I made my way to the Boggy Swamp, where I followed the main path to collect a few scoutflies on the way, and then start working on freeing the Zeppelin floating in the sky, by breaking the stator with a fireball from the yellow eco I collected. There's a total of 4 of these across the level, and each of them rewards me with a power cell. A bit later, I reached this area where I couldn't progress further, as the main path was filled with orbs, so I was forced to go back to the start. Thankfully, by going up to this platform and using a roll jump, I could make my way to the end of the level and then work my way backwards. After quickly breaking another tether to get another power cell and collecting a scoutfly on the way, I found your average Twitter user that rewarded me with a power cell after killing these swarms of rats. I collected another scoutfly and then broke the 3rd tether to collect another power cell, and then I used this blue path to jump up to this area where I got ambushed once again. And after defeating all of the enemies, I obtained another power cell. I ran into an issue here as the last tether required me to use this blue pad full of Precursor Orbs on the way to get to it. Thankfully, there is a trick to make it there with a different blue pad. By spinning on a specific frame after starting a jump from the blue pad, you can interrupt the jump pad animation to regain control of Jak in the air. This allows you to move to this specific spot by the thorns, where you'll get hit and get bounced forwards, and eventually fall into the area where you can destroy the last stator and obtain another power cell. To finish the level, I made my way back to ride Flute, which is the bird that I freed from the egg all the way back on the Sentinel Beach, to obtain the scoutflies and power cell I was missing. This section was surprisingly challenging as there are orbs scattered around every single one of these wooden platforms, forcing you to go on the very edge on every single one of them. But after a few attempts at it, I obtained all of the remaining collectibles I had left on this level. Now that I was done with the Boggy Swamp, it was time for the final big level of the hub world. I made my way to the Precursor Basin and hopped on the zoomer, as this whole level will be played with it. I started by chasing these moles down to their hole, and after getting them all in there, I went back to talk to one of the NPCs from the Rock Village to obtain a power cell. After that, I worked on this race challenge where my goal was to complete the race in under 45 seconds. After doing so, I went back one more time to Rocky Village, where another NPC rewarded me with a power cell. After going back to the Precursor Basin, I collected this green eco to cure all of the plants that got infected by dark eco to obtain another power cell. I then started chasing these flying lurkers, also collecting some scoutflies on the way, and after killing all of them, I was rewarded with one more power cell. After that, I started making my way to a power cell that was floating in the middle of the air. I went up this ramp and then lined myself up to jump in between these two orbs and land on this little extension of the platform on the right side. After being safe, I very carefully made my way around these orbs to jump onto this next platform. From here, I went to the right side of it to jump to that next platform and made my way to this spot where I carefully lined up the zoomer to jump over these few platforms while also avoiding these boxes placed right in the middle of the platforms. I collected the scoutfly in this last platform and then lined myself up to easily make this jump. God damn it. Finally, on my third time here, I managed to actually collect the power cell and barely no land right on top of the orbs below me. I then started this purple ring challenge where I had to collect all of the purple rings to be rewarded with a power cell. However, if I ever took too long to collect any of the rings, they would disappear and I would have to restart the challenge all the way from the beginning. And as fate would have it, I failed the jump to collect the last purple ring of the challenge, having to redo it from the start one more time where I now would actually succeed and get the power cell. I then went through the scary path one more time to start working on the blue rings challenge, which works the same way as the purple one, except the blue rings are placed in even more inconvenient spots for me. Thankfully, after only one failed attempt, I managed to collect the last brew ring and obtain my last power cell. That is, if I hadn't forgotten one of the scout flies, which I then went to quickly collect to actually be done with this level. The mountain pass, just like the fire cannon area from the first hub world, is another one of the zoomer sections that connects the hub worlds together. However, before being able to go through it, I find the second boss fight of the game. This is honestly the most annoying one to go through, but after a few failed attempts, I managed to defeat it to obtain the first power cell of the level. In the zoomer section, I have to make it to the end before these lurkers, as once they reach the end of this level, an enemy will detonate a bunch of dynamite, killing Jak. This forces me to have to go really fast through the level, as I will also have to collect the scout flies to obtain another power cell, leaving me very little room to slow down to avoid some of the orbs, making moments like this fairly challenging to go through. There's also one power cell I can currently obtain on this level, as I'm required to unlock the yellow eco vents on a later level, so I will be coming back to this level at a later point to obtain the last power cell. I obtained my power cell from collecting all of the scout flies, as well as obtaining the power cell at the end of the level, and then made my way to the Volcanic Crater. The Volcanic Crater is the last hub world of the game. I quickly made my way to the warp gate to unlock it, and then I quickly collected all of the scout flies to obtain a power cell. I then made my way to the spider cave where I touched this yellow eco vent, and then speed ran my way back to the Volcanic Crater to blast this crate to unlock the only other possible power cell of this hub world. I made my way back to the spider cave and I started shooting all of these worms on these big logs, as well as shooting this crystal at the top. After killing the last worm, the power cell spawned in this middle platform, which caused the problem. If I attempt to collect the power cell normally, I will be forced to collect an orb during the cutscene. Thankfully, if you just crouch into the power cell, you won't collect any orbs. I then moved my way up with these moving platforms to reach yet another power cell, and then started collecting a few scout flies nearby. I then went to this other area where I destroyed 2 more crystals and got another scout fly, and then made my way to this very dark area. In here, I punched these crystals to light up the area and broke another one of the purple crystals, as well as obtained a scout fly on the way to the ending of the area. In here, I got another power cell and then made my way back to the starting room and took this other path, where I found and broke the last crystal to obtain another power cell. After this, I made my way to this big room with a robot in the middle. I carefully broke this scout fly box and then went up this platform and made my way to these green eco boxes. By jumping on top of them and then doing a high jump, I can barely grab this ledge above, skipping a section of this area and quickly collect another scout fly. I then make my way to this area where, by performing a double jump followed by a spin to maintain my height for a bit longer, I can barely make it to this platform and grab the power cell. Now, it's time for another challenge. While apparently it is possible to reach that power cell on top of the robot by taking the normal path, some of the orbs are very difficult to avoid, and every time I mess it up, it would take me almost a minute to make my way back to where I was. So instead of doing that, I decided to learn the speedrun tech to make my way from this platform all the way up there. Uppercut jumps are one of the main movement abilities. By executing an uppercut jump after Jak runs off a ledge, you are able to get a lot more distance than you'd normally be able to. If you, instead of running off the ledge at full speed, walk as slowly as you can, this will significantly increase the amount of distance you are able to cover. With good timing on my inputs, I'm just barely able to grab the ledge of that platform and skip having to go through the normal route and can finally grab the power cell. I then make my way down to this section and take a path on the back of this room to make it to this area, where I avoid all of these spiders to collect my last power cell of Spider Cave. After this, I make my way back to the Volcanic Crater to enter this gondola that takes me to a new level, Snowy Mountain. This level has a couple interesting things going on, so bear with me as I try my best to explain some of the tricks I will do. When I get here, I immediately run into an issue. To obtain one of the power cells, I need to press these buttons on the top of all of the precursor blockers. However, multiple of these have a bunch of orbs right on top of them, which are normally impossible to avoid. I then fall down here and execute what is called dupe glitch. I start by breaking the scoutfly box to get the scoutfly out of it, and then I press the pause and spin buttons at about the same exact time. By doing this correctly, you will see that while the Scoutfly is still there on the ground, my Scoutfly counter on the pause menu now shows that I've already collected 1 Scoutfly. The reason as to why I did that will be relevant later, but for now, I'll just keep going through Snowy Mountain normally. I went up this hill with snowballs rolling down here and grabbed this red eco to kill one of these 3 enemies on top of the wooden catapults. I dropped down here from where the red eco was located to collect the Scoutfly, and then I made it through these platforms on the side to kill another one of the catapult enemies. I then went back to this platform and jumped off of it, and with a well-timed spin, I can make it to this platform at the bottom, which skips the entirety of the flute section. While it isn't necessary, the flute section has a lot of annoying to avoid orbs, which makes it not only more time consuming to try, but just straight up harder than executing the skip. I then ride this platform to get back up and go to this area that I just unlocked, and then climb my way up to these wood platforms, and very carefully obtain the Scoutfly at the top. I then make my way to this other Scoutfly box and then quickly go back to this wood platform where I jump to this platform to obtain a power cell. I exit out of this room and go through these trees to enter the secret area, where once I get to the end of it, I'm able to collect the power cell and also unlock the yellow eco vents. I then go on this left path to obtain another Scoutfly, and then I get some red eco to kill the last one of these enemies for 1 more power cell. I then carefully deactivate some more of the blockers, and then I enter this cave to collect my 6th Scoutfly. I then make my way to the yellow eco vent with a boosted uppercut to avoid the orbs on that tiny path, and then shoot a crate in the wall to unlock another power cell. I then make my way to this area full of enemies blocking the way, and after slowing killing them all, I managed to obtain another power cell. Now, it's time for me to set up 1 more glitch. By breaking the last Scoutfly box and collecting the Scoutfly, I can spawn the power cell in. However, instead of collecting it right now, I bait the spiky ice enemy by going to a few specific spots so that once I'm at 1 HP, the enemy is located next to the power cell with enough room for me to sneak in between the enemy and the power cell. The goal here is to collect the power cell at the same frame that the enemy kills me, activating a ghost state on Jak. The benefit I get from this glitch is that Jak is now in a weird state where he is alive, however, he now can't collect any single collectible, as well as some other small side effects, which will finally allow me to deactivate those final precursor blockers I previously couldn't. I also have to be careful as even just the act of bonking, dying, or reloading my save will get rid of this ghost state, forcing me to have to redo the glitch again. I make my way to the last few blockers, and after deactivating them all, I can finally spawn in that power cell. Since I can't collect the power cell in this state, I reload my save and make my way back to finally obtain this power cell. Now, remember the dupe glitch I explained way back at the start of this level? Well, there's a big reason I had to do it. You see, when executing the Ghost Jak glitch, when you obtain that power cell on the same frame as you die, it actually does not count towards your total power cell count. And not only that, but the power cell is completely gone and never obtainable again. Thankfully, since that power cell is related to the Scoutflies, and since I duped the Scoutfly in the beginning, I now have that same power cell spawning on the duped Scoutfly at the start of this level, allowing me to collect this last power cell and actually 100% Snowy Mountain. By finishing Snowy Mountain, I am now done with every single main level from the 3rd hub world. Or well, I still have one last thing to do. I now start heading back to the previous zoomer section, as for one of the power cells to be obtainable, I needed to activate a yellow eco vent. Since I had done that on Snowy Mountain, I'm able to get the yellow eco here and use it to shoot this rock to destroy it, and then jump to this last power cell. And after this, I could finally make my way to the final level in the game. But before that, I had to make my way through the last zoomer section. Lava Tube is the last connector level in the game, connecting the last hub world with the final level. Besides needing some careful movement around these orbs at the start, this one also doesn't have much to show. I collected all of the Scoutflies with ease and obtained a power cell for that, and once I made it to the end, I obtained the last power cell of this area. Here, before going to the last level of the game, I activated the last warp gate. Now, it's time for Golden Maia's Citadel, the final and hardest level of the game, even more so considering the challenge I'm attempting. Here, I have to save 4 different mages, where all of the sections leading to them have some fairly difficult platforming moments, as well as some really difficult to avoid Precursor Orbs. The blue maze section in particular forces you to collect blue eco and is full of orbs in extremely challenging spots to avoid. So now that I was done watching the cutscene that plays when you enter the level, it's time to get to work. I get my save slots ready with save files, and right after that, I load my save to start this level, and I am now at the end of the level and can simply free the last mage and obtain the power cell to unlock the final boss fight of the game. Good one, Naughty Dog. Funny enough, however, this last power cell actually presents a problem. Once I collect it, the cutscene for obtaining it will place me right on top of an orb. There's no crouching shenanigans here that can help me avoid it either. Thankfully though, there is one more thing that can be done. By timing a pause input on the exact moment that Jak grabs the power cell, I can enter the pause menu and have the game auto-save the power cell onto my save file before I actually enter the cutscene for collecting it. This means that all I have to do now is load the save file again, and I will be back on the last area without having collected that orb. While I now could just go finish the game, I did mention at the start that I would be getting the maximum percentage possible in the game, so I still have a bit more to do. Being right at the top area of the level gives me a massive advantage. I quickly collect a scout fly nearby, and then I can just jump onto these moving platforms and then jump straight to the end of the blue eco maze section to free him without having to play any of the gameplay in it and just collect the power cell. Not only that, but from this part, I can also jump down to the end of the yellow mages section, also skipping all of the gameplay there. After obtaining its power cell, I jump on these spinning platforms and go around this corner for another scout fly, and right after, I make my way to the start of the previous mages section to obtain another scout fly. I then head out all the way to the start to obtain the scout fly I skipped when reloading my save file, and then I make my way to the final mages section. I have to do this one as it has a scout fly box midway through it, as well as generally not having any difficult to avoid orbs. I deviate from the path for a bit to collect another scout fly, and then I obtain the scout fly that is located midway through the mages section. I quickly finish this mages section and then free it to obtain one more power cell, as well as actually unlocking the path that leads me to the end of the game. After making my way up to the top, I jump back down to the blue mages section as I accidentally forgot to collect the scout fly that is located close to the ending of it. And once I did so, I had finally collected every single thing I could collect in the whole game, without having obtained a single Precursor Orb. This leaves me with 15 power cells left to collect. However, all of these are related to spending orbs to buy them. So at this point, the only thing left to do is to go to the top one last time and defeat the final boss. After a long way back up, I'm finally here, and after riding this elevator for a while, I finally got to the boss fight. About 2 minutes of fighting it proceed, and after collecting this white eco to blow up the final boss, I had finally finished Jak and Daxter the Precursor Legacy without collecting any Precursor Orbs, and ending the run with the maximum percentage of the game I could obtain, 78%. Now that I'm finished with this challenge, and before I end the video, there's a couple more things I want to mention. This video would not have been possible to make without all of the helpful videos and documentation the Jak speedrunning community has done throughout the years. I will be leaving links in the description to all of the information I looked into that helped me successfully pull off this run. Also, this is my first attempt at making a big video like this, and it's not quite perfect, but I'm pretty happy with how it turned out, and I definitely plan on doing more of these in the future. If you have any game or challenge suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I would also really appreciate it if you guys liked the video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you all for watching this video, see ya.